What's going on, guys? Evan the Dark Souls 2 enthusiast here, bringing another Dark Souls 2 gameplay commentary. And I just want to start this video off by sort of elaborating on what we'll be talking about in this commentary, so you guys know if you should, I guess, stay for the presentation or not, because I know it is an hour and 10-ish minutes of your time, a little less maybe, so bit of a commitment. So let me just jump right in and talk about what's going to happen. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my channel and where that's going to go. You know, thanks to some subscribers, you know, do the drill updates type stuff, so we're going to start with that here in a minute. Then we're going to jump into things, some other topics of interest, such as, you know, I want to talk about the issue of adaptability within the Dark Souls games, within Dark Souls 2, you know, my thoughts on adaptability and its relevance, and how I think it will affect the game long term, if it will affect the game long term. I want to talk about Covenants here a little bit, my issues with the Covenant system, the things I like about the Covenant system, some of the changes they've made. To be a broad overview, we won't go over all of the Covenant-related stuff. I want to talk about the issue of disconnecting when invaders invade you, because I know a lot of people use disconnecting as a defense, and you need to be careful when doing that. There is a punishment system in this game, and we'll talk about that too. I want to talk about the topic of artificial difficulty in Dark Souls 2, and is artificial difficulty a thing? I also want to talk about the graphics and the environments and things like that. Just some impressions I've had that people have been talking about since the game's launch, and seems to be recurrent themes amongst players and the forums and things like that. So, and of course, the difference between this video and the last video is the last video is kind of mostly the quote-unquote real talk stuff, thoughts on Dark Souls. And there's going to be a lot of that in this video too, as there has been already. But I also have a sort of video timeline laid out in front of me, and you'll find that in the description of the video, where I sort of hyperlink to different times in the video where you can see particular things of interest. So I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit. Fair warning, the purpose of this video is actually to show players how to get geared up quickly, and that includes things like the fire longsword and things like that. All the early game weapons people use. There's a couple different early game weapons most people like to take on. I've used all three, and I like all three for different things. For reference, the early game weapons most players use are the fire longsword, the mace, right, this is the right-on mace, it's that good. And some players like the Heide sword, I don't know how it's pronounced, but those are all popular, and of course we saw the Heide sword in the last video. But we'll get to all that as we go, but first and foremost, everyone should know that this video is kind of how I think you should go about gearing a Cleric early game. It is not necessarily the most natural progression through the game. It does, however, grab some equipment at the start of the game that pretty much should be gathered as soon as possible for almost any class, and most importantly would be the Ring of Binding, which we'll talk about later in the video. But for now, let's go ahead and jump back up to the introduction, like I said, and now we have the channel overview. So, or the video overview, rather. So, first and foremost, I'd like to thank everyone that commented on the Dark Souls upload 2 days ago. I really appreciate it. It's kind of breathed a lot of life back into me to start doing these commentaries again. Not that I ever was disinterested, but, you know, I talked about in the last video, time is really precious when you have a full-time job, and time is precious if you have things going on in your life, you know. Family, significant others, employment, friends, you know. There's only 24 hours a day, and if you're like me, you've already cut your sleeping down to about 5 hours a night, and it's probably just unhealthy to cut down anymore. And I should probably work out and things like that. So all these commitments a person needs to make time for, and people handle those time commitments in different ways depending on where they are in their life and things like that. But it was really good to get some good feedback on the last video. So I had over 100 views and 5 comments in less than 24 hours. I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you're a small channel with 2,000-ish subscribers, so probably less than 100 active, when you have that much engagement on a video, especially when you haven't uploaded a series for a while, it is just really exciting. So I'd like to thank everyone for sort of making my day. It's really inspired me to do a lot more Dark Souls 2 content. I was kind of basing how far I would go with my Dark Souls 2 uploads, kind of based on how successful it was during the upload. I mean, admittedly, I upload when I want, and what I want, but at the same time, you know, it's always nice to see people are actually watching it. That video got great engagement, more engagement than my Hearthstone and my Dota videos typically do, so that's great. If you are watching the Hearthstone and the Dota, those are sticking around, those aren't going away. I still play those games, and I still love those games. I'm not a Souls-only channel, just like I'm not a Call of Duty-only channel. I like to dabble in different games, and it's interesting that I say that, considering this channel actually started as a Call of Duty channel years and years ago, but that's neither here nor there. So, really guys, thanks for everything. I appreciate it. This jump right here, you're about to see on camera. The item you get is not particularly valuable, but I just think it's really awesome. It's like an awesome looking jump. Like visually, it just looks to me like you can't make it, then you jump, and you're like, oh, this actually is a lot easier than a lot of the other difficult jumps in this game. So, right here you'll see me healing with the chime. That's, I think, one of the huge advantages of the Cleric is, in my opinion, having access to early heals is more useful than having access to early sorceries. I mean, both save you life, both save you Estises, both save you soul gems, just in different ways. But the mace is such a powerful starting item that combines with heals and the mace, like, you don't really need magic to decimate anybody, which if you play the mage, the sorcerer class rather, I think it's a little more necessary. But that's just my take on it early on. I definitely think that if players, as they make their characters, are considering playing sorcerers, they should be aware that their damage output is, in my experience, significantly lower than just people that are doing all the physical deeps, like with a mace, like I am using. The mace is an amazing weapon, so there's a good chance to talk about that. So, like I said, the 3 starting weapons people tend to use are the Hilde Sword, which has a great moveset and is a quality weapon. When I say quality weapon, that means it is a weapon that scales up both strength and dexterity close, if not equally, and thus, if you're doing that kind of build, that sword is fantastic, or if you just haven't found anything better yet. I'm accidentally shield smiting him. Man, just swapped into two-handing my shield on accident. It was kind of silly. I'm so scared of this guy right now. I found the trash up. Yeah. Sometimes I find the trash mobs to be really appealing. This upload is actually sort of replete with just little mistakes like that. You know, poor choices. I find playing Dark Souls, there's definitely this balance you need to find between, you know, getting really aggressive and getting the job done and playing carefully. I mean, obviously if you're on a speed run, it's just kill everything as quickly as possible, if not even run past enemies. But for me, who's someone who's comfortable taking their time, I guess it's more of about finding that balance between playing safe and playing aggressive. You play too safe, you miss a lot of good opportunities, which waste a lot of time and can actually get you killed because it's just that many more opportunities for you to make a mistake. The sooner the fight's over, the less time there is to make a mistake. At least that's always been my experience. Now, I always prefer the slow and steady wins the race kind of approach to video games, which is why I'm not much of a speedrunner. I did do a speedrun of the original Dark Souls, which will never reach YouTube because it wasn't a record time or anything. It was pretty fast, but not something I was comfortable putting commentary over or uploading because I didn't do it live. But anyway, so, you know, a topic that's come up in a lot of forum discussions, and a topic that I myself am still trying to dabble in, because I don't think anybody really understands the true nature of exactly how it works yet, which we're not far into the game's release, but I kind of wish someone would figure this out. I almost wish that we get a comment from FromSoft or a rep that would just kind of eliminate any mystery, because I've never been a huge fan of, like, sometimes developers will release patch notes for games or make design choices where they won't sort of quantify what's happening with it, because they kind of want you to feel it out instead of number crunching and min-maxing with it. So an easy example, and stereotypically we're going to use Call of Duty for an example, because it's something everyone plays and it's easy to understand. So in Call of Duty, sometimes they'll patch a gun, and then they won't actually tell you how they changed the stats on that gun. And as a result, they want you to feel out the changes to the weapon and see how it's affected the game, instead of just telling you. And if you're watching the gameplay here, you'll notice that when I have a weapon that I have to two-hand for the requirements, I just struggle. Mentally and conceptually, I don't do well knowing I have to be two-handing a weapon. I'm like, oh, but I want to use my shield and use all my sidearms and whatnot. And so I just, I'm never that kind of player that makes their build only have enough strength. Most players, when they're gearing for PvP, or when they're even trying to do an optimized, like, PvE build, most players will decide upon a weapon that they plan on using and plan around that, and then get the straight dex, strength, or faith, whatever their weapon's going to scale with, and make an optimal setup. I recommend all players should do that. I think they'll have a more enjoyable Souls experience if they actually do take the time to do a little research before they play. I think using spreadsheets in Dark Souls and things like that, I think it's a really good idea. I never thought this was the right kind of game to just kind of play and see what happens. I think this is more of a, once the information is out there, which now it is, on launch day it wasn't really, but if you've got the information, go out, use it, build your characters correctly. And anyway, where I'm going with that is, I'll never be the player that needs to always two-hand their weapon. I just don't do it. I wind up making myself look silly when I try to attack with a weapon I don't have the strength for and things like that. see me getting crushed by these guys here. At least in my experience playing Dark Souls 2, the biggest change for me has been the bosses are much easier in Dark Souls 2 than in Dark Souls 1 or Demon Souls, in my opinion. Whereas the trash mobs, I think they're a little more challenging than they were in Dark Souls 1, because in Dark Souls 1, enemies weren't always jumping you. I mean, there was a lot of that, but I feel like in Dark Souls 2, the norm is for them A, to jump you, and B, you should get mobbed, essentially. Like, most enemies come in huge, like, quantities, and there's nothing wrong with that, but I definitely think it adds to the challenge and stuff like that. So, something I have observed I found sort of interesting. I think it makes the game more challenging. I think it leads to a lot more players dying more often. So we're coming up on the 11-minute mark here, which is kind of the first big moment in our timeline. And essentially, what makes this part pretty significant is this is roundabouts where we will unlock the fire sword, but also where we will hit the first bonfire in this area, up by this cathedral here. We'll also meet, excuse me, the merchant hag, Melentia? I know she pronounces her name for you. I'm terrible with pronunciations. You'll just have to forgive me. You guys want to hear me pronounce Zelandier again? Just butcher that all day, every day. So, anyway, what makes this merchant significant is she sells the Lingrass key, what have you. It's the key that opens the door to the blacksmith shop that was locked earlier. He's an essential merchant, so buying that key is a great investment of your souls. In fact, you'll wind up dumping a ton of souls into her early if you're playing correctly, in my opinion. You want to drop up to 10,000 souls on her, because at the 10,000 soul mark, she will give you a covetous silver serpent ring +1, and what makes that ring so significant is it actually boosts souls gained from enemies. So if you get it early in the game, it'll pay for itself a lot quicker, and then some, just a couple boss fights. So I recommend grabbing it early, especially when you have open ring slots. And in New Game is much easier than New Game Plus in this Souls iteration of the game, so getting it is great. I have some suggestions for what you want to spend your starting souls on. A lot of this will depend on the kind of character you're playing and where you plan on going with your character, but I think everyone should buy the Pharaoh's Lockstone, the Lingrass key, a couple fire bombs, maybe 3. I bought the Heal Miracle, being a cleric, and all players who are clerics should consider purchasing it. And the Traveling Merchant Hat, all players should also buy. So you want to buy the Pharaoh's Lockstone because it's going to open items that are immediately useful to you, more useful than the 4,000 souls you expend. And since you're trying to get up to 10k anyway, she doesn't have that much useful stuff. So you want to buy that right away. You want to buy the Lingrass key because it unlocks essential merchants, the most important thing she sells. So you're halfway there. The fire bombs, they're only worth like 600 souls, so not a huge contribution. The Heal Miracle is another 1,500. That gets you really close. So the fire bombs plus the Heal Miracle, that's a little over 2,000. So 4 plus 2 plus 1, 7. Math is hard. And then you buy the Traveling Merchant Hat. All players need to buy the Traveling Merchant Hat because it increases the drop rate on items. It is imperative to buy it and wear it. I think all players should be wearing a helmet that boosts item drop rate, because a lot of really useful stuff will drop early game, and a lot of useful stuff drops throughout the entire game. Plus, another thing to keep in mind is items that might not seem important to you now, certain armor sets that don't seem important to you now, they might become important to you later, depending on where your vigor winds up, and so how much equipage you have, what you think looks good. All these considerations players use when they equip gear, myself included. Until you see it, until you wear it, until you upgrade it, you really don't necessarily know what you're going to be wearing. Particularly right now when there's not... what a terrible death. Particularly right now when players haven't seen all the different options yet. We don't have a lot of wiki information available, and as a result, it's important that you consider that enemies only respawn a finite number of times. So sometimes you can kill all the spawns of an enemy before you get a full set of the armor. I've had that happen. I was trying to farm a full Desert Sorceress's set because I think it looks amazing. I think it's one of the better done armors in the game, and it's one of the only armors for female characters that actually looks feminine. If you wear the right parts of it, you don't even come off like a tramp. It actually just looks sort of optimal, and so I recommend trying to farm it just for looks, and it actually has some really useful stats. It boosts intellect and intelligence. It boosts intelligence and things like that. It's a good armor set, and I actually killed all the Desert Sorceresses before it all dropped. So that can be a very frustrating thing, and boosting that item find early, I think, is something all players should prioritize. There will be better opportunities to get better gear that drops more things than the merchant hat. But since you have to drop 10k souls on her anyway, unless you're going to buy like a stack of human effigies or something, you need to spend the souls anyway, so you might as well spend them optimally. Early in the Souls games, all the Souls games, spending souls in a manner that is most efficient is the priority, because you can always farm up and catch up later with whatever you need. It's just, early game, it's so helpful not to waste souls and just invest properly, because you need so many things when you start a new character that money's tight like anything else. So you'll see me going back to my bloodstain here after falling off that branch there. Pretty silly, really. This is also where we're going to get the fire longsword up ahead, so most players wind up using the fire longsword as their primary starting weapon. I think this is a mistake if you're playing a cleric. In other classes, I recommend it. But once again, it depends on your stats and how things look. Because lightning, for example, scales off the faith, fire scales off of intellect and faith both, but it scales off a higher stat, is my understanding. That could be wrong, so if that is wrong, let me know. But essentially, if you're playing a stat that is low on strength and dexterity, the fire longsword is going to be your best bet. And if you're playing a cleric, you just use the mace, because the mace does striking damage and has huge poise damage. Well, none of that matters much in PvP. In PvE, strike damage is great because it does bonus damage against armored enemies. And so most enemies that are challenging are in fact armored. The extra hidden damage is great. Not to mention being able to hit, stun, and stagger enemies makes a huge difference. So, honestly, I think the mace is a tremendously useful weapon throughout the game. I have personally finished all of the Dark Souls game with just a fully upgraded mace, and I recommend it to anyone who is kind of wondering what's a good starter weapon. Mace is easy to use, the moveset is acceptable. The only thing that kind of sucks about the mace is its range leaves a lot to be desired. So if you're trying to PvP with it, you're trying to hit an enemy that's got a lot of range, sometimes it's best to do the running attack, because in my opinion that's the best balance between speed and range. So that's my choice. For best starting weapon would be an upgraded mace. Until that's available, I would stick to the fire longsword. There's actually also, if you are playing a sorcerer, do not take the time to make a magic mace, because there's already a magic mace in the game you can get fairly early on that you can just upgrade. It makes a lot more sense than paying souls to make your own already in the game. So you see the fire lizard at the end of the hall who's spewing the continual fireballs at me. This is the fire longsword, by the way, guarded by a fire monster. You can kill that early in the game. The easiest ways with ranged attacks, either with a bow or with magic. Going melee with him is pretty challenging early in the game, at least in my opinion. I'm sure some people think it's easy, but I don't recommend it because the rewards you get are fairly minimal. There is a locked door behind them, but that locked door doesn't contain anything useful. And there's some pyromancies and there's some other things. I mean, it's not useless items, but they don't make your early game significantly easier. You usually wind up taking a lot of time, maybe a couple deaths to get something that's not useful. And this early in the game, when human effigies are tight, every time you die, you lose max HP up to 50%, and that hollowing is a big deal. I mean, that can make the game very challenging if you're missing half your life. And so in this video, we'll be finding a way to alleviate that, which is essentially to get the Ring of Binding, so you can remove that death penalty to a point. And then it's a lot better to try the risky things once death doesn't set you back. Kill these guys to snag some more souls. I still need to get my covetous serpent running at this point in the video, and that makes a big difference because I know I'm going to be downing a couple bosses here in the next couple uploads and the next couple hours of game time. So having the silver serpent ring that added souls on those bosses not only pays for the ring and the things I invested in, but it makes a huge difference throughout the game and the soul level you travel through throughout the game. Which is one way to help with the difficulty of the soul series is not to power level or over level, but just be efficiently using all your souls, trying not to miss bloodstains. I mean, this is all basic stuff, but it's something that I think people forget, that a reason you can get really far behind in a souls game is you can kind of drop behind the recommended soul level for an area. And you wind up dropping below that recommended soul level when you're farming adequate souls from bosses and stuff, but you keep losing them. So if you're new to the series, I recommend spinning your souls frequently, don't have a lot to lose, try to strategically plan your deaths so you die in an area you can get back to your bloodstain. Just little things like that you learn to do as you play the Souls games for an extended period of time. And you'll see me kind of debating what other things I might want to buy from her. In retrospect, I knew exactly what I should have bought, but The reason I recommend buying some fire bombs is they unlock some hidden passages throughout the game, so just buying them now so you always have them available is pretty helpful. So I recommend 3 because I know of at least 2 uses for them, you know, in the first 5 hours of the game that you can unlock hidden passages, so having them for that, definitely a good idea. And the third doesn't hurt if you miss. I mean, if you're lousy at throwing firebombs, I'd probably carry like 4 or 5, to be honest. Another early game priority that isn't in this upload that we need to cover is getting the binoculars if you're a ranged character. Because the binoculars allow you to manually aim at targets, which it's kind of silly that, you know, a feature that was expected to be in Dark Souls 2 but didn't seem to make it in was, you know, manually aiming of spells, like being able to toggle up a manual aim. And that never came to pass, and I think that's a big letdown developmentally. I think that you'll see me popping here some of my consumable souls in order to pay off my covetous serpent ring, but you know, I think that's a big mistake. I think that, you know, magic is not gimped in this game. Magic is very useful. You know, it's in no way bad. I know I talked a little bit about that in the next video. My thoughts on magic was just that faith was a little stronger, but by no means did I think sorceries were bad. I think that sorceries are more useful in Dark Souls 2 than they were in Dark Souls 1 for a lot of different things. But ultimately, it's kind of held back by the fact you can't manually aim at things. Like, basically becomes a bad bow, because in this game the bows are very powerful. They scale well with dex. They're all around useful. The arrows track better, but I have easy built-in manual aiming, and I think it's just sort of a huge oversight of developers to put manual aiming in only through the binoculars. And I have to carry a set of binoculars to engage manual aiming on my spells, which I'm sure they realize. I mean, the description of binoculars within the game kind of hints and plays with the fact that, you know, you can use binoculars for a whole bunch of creative, useful things. Like, yeah, we know, like manual aiming, but if you knew that was a player need, you know players are going to use them for that. Like, why couldn't we have just sort of been forward-thinking and went ahead and unlocked that? So that's just my thoughts on the whole thing. You'll see me warping back to Majula here. I think I'm considering maybe leveling up some things or maybe upgrading my mace. I know that I will be continuing to use my mace, that the Fire Longsword and the Hilt Sword will make appearances later in this character's life cycle for specific things, but my main weapon of choice is going to be a mace that's, you know, a bolt mace, which bolt stone basically means lightning, so adding lightning means you scale off of faith. Lightning is my favorite elemental. I love the look, I love the little zzz sound, so being plain faith is just an added bonus of using lightning weapons, and more enemies seem to be weak to lightning than fire, as was the first Souls game, so I'm sorry, the first Dark Souls game, not the first Souls game. In Demon Souls, elemental weapons were a little different. There's actually a lot of enemies in this game that have magic resistance, whereas I felt as though in Dark Souls 1, magic, you know, Moonlight Greatsword, stuff like that, like, as much in magic damage as possible was the best choice, because there was a minimal amount of, like, you know, things that were resistant to magic as compared to fire or lightning. Whereas I feel in this game there's enough magic-resistant enemies that it's not, you know, necessarily the go-to damage type. But I know that fire is not. So many things are resistant to fire that, you know, I carry a fire weapon for the things that are weak to fire, because I find that things that are weak to fire are extremely weak to fire. The things that aren't weak to fire, when possible, kind of better to use something else. So, you know, another design choice I think was at least brilliant in my opinion for this Souls game is allowing players to warp bonfires right from the start of the game, because realistically, who wanted to walk between bonfires? I mean, I didn't mind, but who really wanted to travel through areas in the Dark Souls games? I mean, personally, I find the immersion in the Souls series to be phenomenal. I mean, the immersion in the world, the fact that you kind of build your own story based on item descriptions and things you observe, I'm all about that. You know, that's kind of like my new favorite kind of storytelling as I've aged, is instead of having a story laid out with all the answers in front of me, I like the kind of build your own world where players can have discussions about what they perceive the boss to be, and, you know, the perception of what this enemy actually is, and things like that. Like, you know, why is the world the way it is? Well, we've got these tooltips on items, we've got some NPC storytelling, and the rest we kind of have to fill in the blanks ourselves and just have investigations and intelligent discussion amongst the community. The Dark Souls lore is fantastic because it's only as bad as you make it, frankly. So obviously I've leveled up my strength now that I can one-hand my moves, so I'll play way less silly. And I'll still play silly sometimes in this video, but less silly. In future videos I'll probably do some editing and drop out some of my death sequences and things like that just to save time, but I kind of wanted to show that, you know, dying in Dark Souls, that's pretty normal and everyone knows that, but sometimes I feel like players assume that once they're veterans of the Souls games, when you die to stupid things, that's shameful or silly. And the Dark Souls community, I've noticed, has become very, very big on the whole get good scrub kind of routine. Get lost on a level, get good. Like, what are you doing getting lost? It's not that hard. Die over and over to a boss. What are you doing? Get good. People can speedrun the game in 2 hours. There is a lot of that discussion, and I just, frankly, I don't think it's called for. I think that these games are designed to kill you. They're designed to punish mistakes, and inevitably mistakes will be made. I mean, even players that make speedruns make mistakes on their speedrun, and acknowledge that they've had to scrap speedruns because of unfortunate deaths and things like that. So, just kind of my thought. I've got, like, I'm kind of wishy-washy when it comes to the forum mentality. I think that players should be able to have mature conversations. If someone is just basically being silly and saying things that are just blatantly untrue, or they have no idea what they're talking about, I think players should have the opportunity, on forums and on online communities, just to point out, like, you have no idea what you're talking about. Please withhold your commentary until you have some clue about what you're talking about. But at the same time, I don't think that communities have become so elitist that people who are struggling in the game can't get some feedback. And I don't know, that's kind of an aside, but it's definitely something to think about. I assume people that watch YouTube videos are engaged enough with the community that they also probably post on some forums. I'd be interested to know if that's true. I mean, obviously my sample size on that research would be inadequate to make any true generalizations, but I guess in my experience, you guys watching my videos, let me know if you guys post on Dark Souls forums and what forums you post on. I myself, I post on the Game FAQs forums pretty regularly. I've been on Game FAQs, since I was like 12. I don't know, I was really young, so I remember Game FAQs before they had corporate sponsorship and things like that, and there wasn't advertisements on the site. I remember when trying to be a moderator on Game FAQs was like, I'm such a big deal on the internet. Time gone by, right? Moderating a forum, I'm so important. Kind of funny how things like that change as you get older. Like, at least in my experience, I remember I used to play like a lot of StarCraft and stuff like that, and I just think like being engaged in the online community I thought was really cool. Like, oh, I'm an officer in this clan, or I'm this and that, and that's really cool, right? Now as I get older, I'm kind of like, it's whatever. It's not really that important. And we take another senseless death here, falling off of things. We've got like a good 20 minutes of death here in this video, just like, falling off cliffs, getting killed by trash mobs, all sorts of mistakes. I guess the whole, like, being big in the internet community, I guess that never really died off. I mean, I'm still friends with a lot of people I met strictly through the internet, and clearly this medium of entertainment, this medium of dialogue we're having is, this whole thing is still internet based. I mean, it never stops in a lot of ways, it seems, and I find that pretty interesting. Now, some people are obviously still more into it than others. I mean, you've got some players that are in the MMORPGs and they're getting married online, and they're running huge guilds of several hundred people. During a period of time when I wasn't really uploading on YouTube much, I was actually, I gave EVE Online a whirl. For those of you that aren't familiar with EVE Online, it's a sandbox-styled MMORPG, probably the only sandbox MMORPG that I thought was done correctly from the research I did, and it was intense. I mean, the way people took that game so seriously. Not that I'm above that. I mean, I get frustrated games. I play Hearthstone. I've been known to yell at my monitor. I've been known to punch my desk. I get juvenile. I get silly. I'll own that. No shame. But I think that some people take it to, like, I don't know, the next level maybe with the whole thing. Getting frustrated by something you put time and money into, that's natural, and nobody likes to lose. And some games are just designed to induce rage. Like TCGs and CCGs are designed to induce rage because at any given time you can blame luck, because there's built-in luck right into the game. Luck never plays as big a factor as the human mind believes it does. Because, the way the rule works is, when you're losing, it's because you can't draw the cards you need and luck is crap. When you're winning, it's all skill. Like, you've just outplayed them. And it's, it's really hard to objectively analyze the balance between luck and skill in card games and a lot of games. Same with Call of Duty, it's all skill when I'm dropping chopper guns and stuff like that. It's not because I got host and it's lag. Every game kind of has that thing. that thing that people blame when things don't go according to plan. And the legitimacy of those claims just vary tremendously based on what's being said in the actual situation. But I think, by and large, people don't take enough ownership of why they're losing in a game and things like that. And I include myself in that. I love the scapegoat. I try my best not to have a scapegoat, but there's definitely those moments like, this is not my fault. That's always the trick too when you analyze your own play. How much of that is true? Like if I play Hearthstone, for example, I know this is a Dark Souls commentary, but if I play Hearthstone and I draw, area of effect or something like that, and I can't draw it, how much of that is on me? How much of that is on the game? But bringing that theme back into Dark Souls, I've noticed that a lot of online community members are discussing like the roll nerf. It goes by a lot of different names depending on the forum you're on and who's talking about it, but I've heard it called something like the roll nerf, phantom hits, phantom range, wonky hitboxes, things like that. And they're basically all talking about the same thing, and I'm not convinced that is a thing. Or if it is a thing, maybe it's deliberate. I'm not sure yet, but for those of you who haven't heard about it, let me go ahead and show a little bit about that. But beforehand, we're kind of up on the next minute here in at 29 minutes we hit the next big moment in our timeline, and that is basically reaching Cartographer Cale up here, and he gives us a key to the house and also unlocks some in town, and also unlocks some quests and things a little later. But the thing that makes it important is it is the location of an early Estus shard, and Estus shards, of course, add additional sips to your Estus flask between bonfire trips, so they're very valuable, and getting one early game is super important. And since this is basically a free Estus flask shard for doing nothing, there's no challenge involved other than talking to Cartographer Cale. Now obviously there's no reason not to pursue these quest lines, so it's important to hit it. It's a lot of early game power up once again, because the sooner you get your Estus flask leveled up, the sooner you burn a couple Sublime Blown Dusts, the easier the game gets. Being properly geared and properly prepared for fights, I find in Dark Souls games, goes really far. Like preparedness and familiarity with the fights goes further than anything else. Grinding soul levels, in my opinion, is far less useful than getting the correct items and knowing the fight. At least that's my thought. I've never found like the level your character is matters that much. It makes a difference. Everything makes a difference, but I think knowing the fight makes the most difference, or aka skill, and having the right stuff for the fight makes more difference than being the right level for the fight. But it all goes back to the same currency, right? Like gear, leveling up gear, having the right materials for things, leveling up. It all comes off the currency of souls, which is a theme of the Dark Souls games I love, is you need souls for everything you want to do. There's really no other currency, and thus, that currency, until you're in New Game Plus or you have everything you need, that currency is pretty valuable. And that's something I've always found enjoyable in the Souls games, is they're all in this one centralized currency and things like that. I don't know, it just fits the game conceptually. It's all about souls. It's all about not going hollow, right? It's like a cool lore thing. I know it's kind of nerdy to get into that kind of stuff, but I put a lot of hours into the Souls games. I like to get into the lore, and I like to get into the environment and things like that. But anyway, getting back to the rolling issue, if it is an issue. I don't know. Jury's still out on this. So this relates back to the adaptability issue. I didn't really wrap up earlier because I was saving it for this juncture in the commentary. So many players feel as though there's what's called a phantom range. Phantom range dates back to Demon Souls. The term is used for, and it's prevalent in all the Souls games due to lag and other factors, where a player might be attacking you, swinging their weapon at you, and this is mostly a PvP term, and they're not actually hitting you on their screen, but on your screen you're taking damage. It's phantom range. It's range that isn't seen on the weapon that's actually there. And it was a huge thing in PvP to the point that many weapons were used specifically for their phantom range, and matchups were heavily influenced by the effects of phantom range on the gameplay. So that's where the term originates from. Whereas now it's being used differently because the assumption is it's a glitched or a broken hitbox, where the hitbox around your character is much larger than it should be. So in other words, you are taking hits that the enemy never actually hits you. It's a broken hitbox. And I'm not convinced that's a thing. I've played a lot of Souls, so to the point I uploaded on YouTube, and I'm not convinced. I see evidence that it's there. I genuinely do. and here you're going to see me probably taking a side and go ahead and upgrade my mace as much as possible, which, since I'm using the mace as my primary weapon, and since I'm about to go farm an area with enemies that are extremely weak to strike damage, upgrading the mace is the best possible decision I can make. So, mace upgrades incoming. But getting back to this phantom hitbox issue, I can't tell. Honestly, I can't tell if it's a thing or not. I mean, sometimes I get hit, and I feel like that didn't really hit me. But then again, how much of that is just that syndrome of, I don't want to take responsibility for the fact I rolled badly. I didn't block fast enough. I was in its range, and the fact remains it hits you, regardless if it's a broken hitbox or not. So, I mean, one way or another, you're going to have to learn to adapt to it, I suppose. We don't have a choice. But, I mean, if it's truly a broken hitbox, if what you see isn't what happens on screen, I think that's something that FromSoft should address and try to patch. I mean, that would be lame. I mean, the game is based on precision combat, precision blocking, precision rolling, precision attacking. Those kind of design flaws, they're a big deal in a game like this, and I think that's something worth addressing. I think that's something that should be addressed. Once again, I acknowledge my omission. I don't even know if it's a thing. I'm not convinced, but enough people think it is that it might be worth looking at. What do you guys think? Those of you watching this, what is your experience with the phantom lockbox, the phantom hitboxes? Are you getting hit by attacks that you don't think really hit you? And if so, is that a thing for you in Dark Souls 1? Because in Dark Souls 1, I never felt like enemies were hitting me with attacks they didn't deserve to hit me with, unless they swung their axe through a wall, like they had no clip or something, which continues on to this game. It's kind of almost a Soul series staple. Not necessarily a good one, but enemies will start attacking a wall beside you and you'll take damage. So I don't know, it's pretty lame really. Some of these design things you'd think would be so obviously a problem that needed to be corrected, but alas, have not been addressed. I think part of that plays into what I perceive. I think rolling has been nerfed a little bit. I mean, the weights in which you roll have been changed dramatically. You have a lot more freedom in your equip load now, at least in my opinion. But I think rolling is less effective than it used to be, unless you build a character to have a really high roll and you get good at timing your rolls on most enemies. And that's always true in Souls games. You need to learn to time rolls in order for them to be effective, just like a parry, where the roll window is a lot more generous than a parry window. And that continues into this game, but I must confess that I can't. I feel like rolling is not what it used to be. I almost feel like blocking is much more reliable now. I mean, so few enemies seem to have enough power or raw strength to guard break me that it just seems safe to turtle behind this shield over some other choices. And obviously, we're going down to this basement here to fight a skeleton. More skeletons spawn down here if you're in New Game Plus, but the point of killing them is they guard Estus Flash shards, and they drop human effigies, which are also valuable, so that's a thing. I don't know, I can't tell if it's just the roll nerf that leads people to believe they're getting hit by things that don't really hit them, or maybe players believe rolling should be stronger. I'm not sure. And what that all kind of builds into, for me, is the discussion of adaptability and what that stat actually does. Because I have a character that has adaptability up in the high 20s, maybe even 30 at this point, where I was tinkering around and trying to see if it makes a big difference. And there's been a lot of evidence that people have created leaning both ways, some of which says it's useful, some of it says it's not useful. So at a minimum, everyone in the community agrees that adaptability is somewhat useful in some immediately observable ways. Leveling up adaptability will give you natural poise. It will give you resistances to poisons and things like that. So, kind of probably something a little reminiscent of another useless stat we had in the past called resistance in Dark Souls 1. Whereas resistance was so bad that unless you were just going for a maxed out character in all the areas in soul level 712 or whatever it was, there was really no point in leveling up because there were stats that were always better. Well, now they've had those built-in poison adaptability, and it still levels up your defense, and it gives you all these things. So is it just a rehashed better adaptability? Or, I'm sorry, a rehashed adapted resistance? I'm not sure. It's supposed to govern your movements, among other things. So, some things that have been confirmed out is adaptability does not make your character run faster. Adaptability does not make your character roll further. And, there's been some talk that adaptability increases your iframes, your invincible frames in your roll. And most players have come to the conclusion it definitely does increase your iframes, but how much is the question. So the typical task that's been done is, so a player will go to the lava, right? And the lava is kind of whatever. You take damage when you're in lava, and you don't take damage when you're rolling. So a player basically started rolling through lava with max adaptability versus without max adaptability to try to visually observe how much additional iframes he had. And basically his conclusion was, with 99 adaptability, I had, 2 more additional frames of invincibility. And the concept of even trying to measure frames within a game is challenging for me, maybe because I don't play fighters where iframes is more of a common discussion. But either way, you get additional invincibility in your roll time. And I can firstly confirm that leveling up adaptability causes your character to drink his Estus flask quicker, which is very useful in boss fights, and I mean, really useful in general, to be able to flask quickly. And if you're PvPing without honor duels, so you're going to be flasking when you get low, then I would definitely say that flasking's a thing. Flasking is useful, and land with adaptability for that alone, not to mention some hard to measure additional iframes, that might be a thing. But I'm sort of skeptical that adaptability is going to become an actually useful stat in any finalized builds, because I feel like the extra stats laying around could be used to raise vigor for better equipment, or it could be used to just get more HP. I mean, HP is always useful. So I don't know how it's going to wind up. We'll find out. Time will tell, I think, once players more fully experience it and mess around with it. I'd kind of like to know now, but since characters now have the option to respec, it's probably not that important. So at 40 minutes, we came up on our next area, which is, Heide Tower of Flame. So this area is paradise for a cleric. I mean, all players need to come through here at least once, but a cleric can wind up spending some time here. So look at the damage the mace does to the knights. The strike damage just does tremendous damage. If you're using a fire longsword and things like that, this will be less effective, less damaging for the enemies you're fighting. But either way, you should absolutely pop the first knight, hit a bonfire. Depending on the kind of class you are, you'll be approaching this in different ways. But you don't need to overcomplicate it. Mages, of course, can kill them from afar, and these enemies are hopeless. But really, they have very few attacks that hit you if you're just standing behind them. Unless you're like me and you literally step into the arc of the backswing of the attack. But, like I said, the easiest way to do this is just walk behind your enemies and start fighting. If you're wearing your silver coveted serpent ring, these guys give significant souls at this point in the game. And this is probably the best early game communication I can think of. And this knight here, he's one of a kind. With Mace, he's important to kill because he drops a Sublime Blind Dust, the first one available to most players in the game. And Sublime Bone Dust essentially will make your flask restore more HP. It won't give you more flasks in total, but will make the flasks more effective. So it's another vital item that's available in the Tower of Flame. Kind of struggled to get that out, So another thing you'll notice is when you kill these standard mobs here, killing them brings up a lever upon their death. When you pull those levers, it actually enlarges the room that you can fight with the boss. The boss area is kind of surrounded by a moat, if you will, or all the water at the bottom of this area, and since Dark Souls characters just sink like bricks, having more area to roll around and fight them, as you can see the platform raises over there in the distance. Those platforms will allow you to have an easier time fighting the boss. So definitely raise all the levers, kill all these guys. They're good for souls. Like I said, the mace is the weapon of choice here for this. A +3 mace, which is easily doable at this point in the game because you don't need large Titanite. You just use Titanite shards, all of which you can buy from the blacksmith. If not from the blacksmith, just available shards early in the game. That's no problem. Getting +4 would require finding a large Tantanite chunk, or not chunk, but a large Tantanite shard, and that takes a little more work early, and really more work than you need. A +3 mace still 3 shots them. +4 mace does not 2-shot them in almost every instance, so it's better not to overwork yourself trying to power up your weapon. Getting a bunch of shards to upgrade to a significant point where it would take, maybe only 2 hits, that seems unlikely and not going to get your time. Much better just settle for a +3 and use your time more wisely and find more meaningful early character upgrades. So they do surprisingly low damage to stamina on a block also. I mean, I'm using a junky shield with very poor stability, so they're not a challenging enemy. They're easy to kill, which is why they're fun. Easy to kill, drops a good number of souls, and frankly, they're in the way of a lot of really important items. So let's kind of my thought. And as I down these guys, you know, I'm pulling more levers to make the boss fight easier. The Tower of Flame has so many important items for early game characters. You know, I recommend coming here before even killing the first boss. Now, I said in the other video, it's perfectly possible to kill the first boss. There's really no reason to not. I mean, the first boss is so easy. The last giant, he's so easy that there's really no need to come here first, other than the fact that I find it convenient to come here first. This makes you a lot more powerful. And as I talk about how easy this thing really is, I underestimate them. Eat a downward creep from this great sword to the face, get stunned, miss my roll, and then just get crushed. The kind of moment a speedrunner would just cry over, like, I've lost a whole minute and 30 on my speedrun, and that's the kind of reason I could never do a speedrun. I just get frustrated so quickly. But I want to give a quick itemization of all the items that are available in the Tower of Flame, just so players understand, you know, what they're looking at. And that would be the Knight set is in this. The Knight set still continues to be a staple of efficiency of weight versus defense. I'm not fully versed in all the armors in this game. Well, I've seen them all. I've not upgraded all of them, so I don't know what's optimal and what's not. But you know, early game, I found the Knight set to be very rewarding to wear, and the weight class was just about right that I could, you know, wear most of it and still have efficient rolling. So you know, I recommend it. Also you'll find the Sublime Bone Dust, excuse me, which we saw earlier. That just, of course, upgrades the Essence Flask. Another great item to have. I recommend it to all players. Now, we haven't seen it yet in the video, but it is coming up very shortly, which is the Ring of Binding. And that's arguably one of the most important rings in the entire game. The Ring of Binding reduces it's kind of like the, you know, there's a ring in Demon Souls that was very similar, and it basically means when you're in, you know, your undead form, that you'll lose less of your max HP. And so it kind of removes the pressure from dying, essentially. Because, you know how long his combo is, that's pretty cool, actually. You know, I never respect the fact that those great sword wielding old knights just have, you know, a tremendously long combo, and killing the first one aggroes the other two, which is kind of frustrating. So, anyway, as I was saying, the Ring of Binding essentially means you only lose, you know, I think it's up to 25% of your max HP in soul form, as opposed to you can only lose up to 50%. And also just, I think, reduces the overall lost HP. Essentially, if you're playing in undead form, you probably will be wearing that ring almost all the time, which means most players will wind up wearing that ring for almost the entire game until they get later game items, which prevents you from dying. Yes, there is a game in Dark Souls, there is a ring rather in Dark Souls 2, which if you're wearing the ring, it's like the rare ring of sacrifice from DKS1, where if you die, the ring breaks and it's like you never died. But in this game, you can actually repair rings that break. So it breaks, you repair it, you put it back on, and you can basically give up a ring slot to never have to worry about life or death at the cost of a couple thousand souls every time. So once you get late game and souls are pouring in more regularly, you know, wearing that ring routinely, you know, if death bothers you, is definitely an option. I mean, you're always going to have the souls for it. So I hurried over to this guy because I want to retrieve my souls before I engage the other two. Because engaging two of them at once is kind of spooky, kind of scary, and I figured I don't want to take any chances. I'm just going to get try to roll through that so hard, and that's one of those moments where I'm like, Phantom Hitbox, the game is broken. But probably not. It's probably just a really bad roll. I noticed that attacks that have a lot more arc to them, I think, are harder to roll through. At least to the sides, it's better just to roll forward into their body, because then you're easier to get out of the sweep radius. At least that's been my experience. So, up ahead here is the Dragonrider Boss fight, which is, of course, featured in this video at the 53-minute mark. So, coming up, first I'm going to finish out cleaning out all the knights and getting the Ring of Binding before I go fight any bosses. But now, what's cool about coming from this side is you can fight them one at a time instead of two at once. That's a good thing. Of course, they drop some cracked orbs that you can use to invade. This area also features Dragon Slayer Ornstein, old Dragon Slayer Ornstein. This is his new version, There's no smoke to back him up, but you won't see that boss fight in this video. That'll probably be in the next video, which will be post some soul farming. One part about this series is if I do any farming or item collecting that's isn't relevant to the walkthrough of the videos, I'm going to skip it. Some traditions of mine continue, some do not. And my Souls videos, I like to cut out the soul farming I do, because there's just really, unless it's a how to farm Souls video, there's just no need to show you the repetition that it's grinding souls or grinding items or grinding, any other thing you need to grind, which is basically only Souls items. So that kind of stuff gets edited out. Death, retrieval of souls normally gets edited out. I left it in this video just to sort of reiterate my point. I consider myself to be pretty confident with the Souls games. I mean, by no means am I top in the community, but I know what I'm doing, and I don't struggle with much of the Souls games anymore, which is a good thing. And thus, I'm just showing that everybody dies in Souls games. Speedrunners die, veterans die, PvPers die, and like I talked about elitism earlier, when you listen to people talk, it seems like they think they can win broken sword hilts and win, any PvP fight, any PvE fight, the whole game's a joke and everyone's just a casual and that's why they struggle. And I don't think that's true. I've put my time into the Souls games. I've got thousands of hours, in Dark Souls 1 and hundreds of hours in Demon Souls, and probably will wind up with thousands of hours in Dark Souls 2, and people die. I just want to sort of debunk the whole myth that there is the elitists out there that are above death. Like, no, prepare to die, guys. Everyone screws up and dies in the Souls games, and speedrunners, for all the videos you see them do of speedruns that are live streamed, where they go without deaths, they also had speedruns where they died and they had to start over. I know this because I've watched them. I noticed the whole speedrunner culture for this game is getting a lot of attention with the whole game only lasts 2 hours, and it only lasts 2 hours once you've beaten the game 15 times and you're very confident what you're doing. So once that knight goes down here, you can pull this chain, which will lower the drawbridge. This leads up to the cathedral, which is Ornstein. I find Ornstein to be somewhat challenging as compared to other bosses in this game. The Dragonrider is definitely much easier, so we will definitely be going to the Cathedral of Blue because there is good faith-based stuff and a good covenant to join. It's just not something I'm really interested in doing right at the moment in this upload. It's probably the next thing I'll do in the next upload. So we have Dragonrider coming up, and after the Dragonrider, we'll be able to access the next area of the game. We'll be able to access knight armor, but maybe most importantly, we'll be able to access a merchant who sells, miracles. And you're playing a faith caster. There are some miracles that just save so much time and are really just fantastic at any point in the game for the PvE world and the PvP world. So Great Lightning Spear is actually sold. You don't have to join the Sunlight Covenant to get it, the Warriors of Sunlight or the Sun Bros. You don't have to join them to get it. She sells it, and while you won't have the faith to use it early game, the minute you get the faith to use it, it'll be a huge asset. So I recommend buying it early. I also recommend buying Homeward right away. I mean, Homeward, such a great skill. It warps you back to the last bonfire you're at. Having the chime for that is just fantastic. Buy it, use it. Homeward. Definitely one of the optimal reasons to play Cleric for PvE, just for the sake of saving time and being able to get around easier. So, as you can see, there's a boss fight coming up, and I'm fixing my inventory and getting my life gems put together. And so, as is my custom, I'm going to go silent during the boss fight. So I'll talk to you guys in a minute. So as you can see, the mechanics for the Dragonrider boss fight are pretty simple. Stay behind him and just keep hitting him. That's basically the easiest way to go about it. This is the first Faith Miracle Vendor.
I can see.
There's a lot of lore behind her that I'm not really going to cover in this video. Now we're actually sort of getting close to the end of the video, so there are some topics I said we were going to talk about which we likely aren't going to get to cover, so I apologize for that. We'll revisit them in future videos, but we probably won't really get to explore Covenants because I have a lot I want to say about Covenants, and I don't want to sort of feel pressed for time as I do this upload, but here's the precious early game miracles that one might want. A lot of these I don't really find necessarily that useful. I would just recommend getting Lightning Spear and Homeward. Absolutely. I mean, if you didn't get a second stack of heal from the Hag, which you probably should have, but if you didn't, feel free to grab a second stack of heal here because the heals are useful. Now, at the time of this upload, I didn't have all the Miracles trophy, so I'll end up buying a lot just because I need all the Miracles anyway, so I might as well buy everything I can. What's really cool is certain spells in this game wind up having with an unlimited restocking. They stock them indefinitely, so if you want to buy heal 99 times so you can have, you can attune 99 heals, that's great. Obviously there's not enough attunement slots in the game, but you get the idea, right? I don't have to play through the game multiple times to get some of the basic skills, because that was something that kind of killed spellcasting for me in Dark Souls 1, was like, if you're using Pyromancy, I mean, the signature moves were, Great Chaos Fireball, which you can only get one stack of, and then Great Combustion and Dark Flame, you can only get one of those a playthrough, or one of each, and so before Prepare to Die Edition, if you wanted to play sort of a heavy axe wielding, because realistically people really use Combustion as their #1 PvP, so if you're PvPing in Dark Souls with the original Dark Souls, you'd wind up having to play through the game 3 times to fill your 3 attunement slots with Great Combustion, or more if you needed it, or if you were using Wrath of God as a faith caster, which essentially you were. You had to play through the game, potentially 5 times to get as many Wrath stacks as you might want. I mean, my ultimate Final Faith build on Dark Souls 1 ideally would have 5 stacks of Wrath of God because it's easily the most useful miracle in PvP. So, just kind of how things wind up, I guess. And I like on this game, not all spells get it. I mean, some skills you have to play through the game multiple times to get, but I am grateful for the fact that certain skills you can just load up on right away. So the remainder of this video will just be me getting the night set. The reason I ran back here is I wanted to farm these guys for some souls, so I could find more miracles. Like, I need all these miracles, and I need all these things. And like I said, early game, the soul is so precious. Oh! That sword swing to the face. What I really like to implement in this Souls game is, so now in Dark Souls 2, if you accidentally kill an NPC or intentionally kill an NPC, you actually revive them at a gravestone. I think that was just a really excellent design choice because it got pretty frustrating, like, sometimes. I had a guy who, when I was trying to PvP, I killed my blacksmith, and I pretty much killed that character, or killed that playthrough at least. So it's cool that now you can bring them back if you give up souls at a gravestone. I like things like that, where you can correct mistakes you've made. There's no permanent mistake, provided you invest heavily to fix it. Kind of a random aside here, won't really do anything else I'm going to say in this commentary, but I was going to say, the new partner is such a letdown for me as a character. I loved Oswald in the first Dark Souls. Definitely my favorite Dark Souls NPC was Oswald. He's not making a recurrence in Dark Souls 2. There's a new partner that just kind of lacks the charm. He does actually have more dialogue, but he just lacks the charm of his counterpart. And I was talking about this earlier, but so we've got these phantom hitboxes, we've got this adaptability, we've got rolling, and that's kind of led some Souls vets to ask the question, is this what they call artificial difficulty? And the definition of that topic alone seems to vary greatly, but I want to share my definition of artificial difficulty, and as I wrap up this long commentary, I want to sort of touch on what I call artificial difficulty. So to me, artificial difficulty is basically what New Game Plus was in Dark Souls 1. Adding HP to enemies, lowering my damage, that obviously makes the game more difficult, but it hasn't really given me anything new, right? Like, the enemy doesn't have a new artificial intelligence, so there's nothing innovative in it, it's just tweaking of the numbers. For me, that's artificial difficulty. It's just deliberately making the game harder without really contributing much to the game other than the difficulty in itself. And so, but that's to be expected on like New Game Plus. I mean, I'm not criticizing. What I'm, jury's still out on this too for me. One thing I have criticized is, so from Dark Souls 2 to Dark Souls 1, the boss fights are actually mechanically, in my opinion, much easier. And the trash mobs are much harder. But the trash mobs aren't harder because they have better AI or anything like that. It's just because normally there's a lot more of them grouped together in a lot more places. And there's more environmental hazards. I'm kind of asking the question, is Dark Souls 2 a harder game? I'd say not. It's no harder than Dark Souls 1. It might actually be easier. But New Game Plus is a whole different ballgame, and I'll cover that in a different video, because the New Game Plus in this game is, in my opinion, really well done. I mean, for me, New Game Plus defines this game, not New Game, which comes with a whole host of problems I will talk about next time for sure, because I have really, really strong opinions about New Game versus New Game Plus, and all the right to do with it and all the wrong. I'd like to talk to you about. I like how he trait hits down when he was dying. Oh my gosh, one hit. So, oh, by the way, going through this tower is how you proceed to the next area of the game sequentially. And I don't recommend doing that until after you've gone back to the first boss and mess with some other things. I'm just saying it is an option at this point. If you want to just keep going through the next areas, you definitely can for whatever reason. But so they've nerfed rolling, they've made you Estus slower, they've given you less Estus. Like, they've done a lot of things that, were definitely, I'd say, crutches in the old Dark Souls. I mean, having access to, a kindled bonfire of 20 flasks, that made even the hardest area pretty easy, because you could just heal basically indefinitely. Things like that, so. In this game, they've given enemies a limited number of spawns, which I don't agree with. Reduce the speed of the character Estises unless you invest in stat points. They've made the roll windows smaller. Arguably, they made enemies' attacks harder to dodge in general, and none of that really has to do with an improved or fascinating enemy AI or new and improved features. It's really just a matter of reducing the effectiveness of existing things. And is that artificial difficulty? I don't know. For me, artificial difficulty is more of, like I said, you just gave the enemies more damage and more HP. But at the same time, when they've just nerfed existing things to be weaker than they were, I think there is a case that almost falls under the sort of the artificial difficulty tag. For me, it's almost a non-issue. I like to engage in conversations regarding the artificial difficulty topic, but, to be completely candid, I could care less. But I think players have, they're on the right track by asking the question. I think that, keeping game developers and keeping things honest, it's necessary that we question things like, is this game really any different or any better? And I think that question is becoming more common in consumers because, video games are expensive relative to some other things, I guess, and cheap compared to some other things too. But that's another topic that I have no interest in discussing. But ultimately, I think players should, if they like their games, they should be asking developers, like, so why are things like this? Like, instead of making the bosses have a lot of patterns, a lot of new stuff, we didn't do any of that. We just made the trash around the bosses harder, and they're still the same old Dark Souls enemies. They just rush you down, they zerg you down. There's just a lot of them now. Questions like that, I think are fair. I don't think they're completely justified either, though. I think there's a lot this game did bring to the table, which, in its own way, might be a new brand of difficulty, and I'll talk about what that entails in another upload. We're about out of time. But one thing I have noticed is, having a character that can do multiple kinds of things, specializing in one thing that still has the option to do other things, was, always a good idea. So, that's always been a thing in the Souls games. If you can do it, do it. But I feel like in Dark Souls 2, having access to some kind of ranged attack is, nothing's vital. You can cover any challenge with just, I guess being good enough to overcome it without it. But, I must confess that to a point, I feel like this Souls game is really geared players, like, if you're not going to use magic, use a bow, and if you're not going to use magic to buff your weapons, like, you really need to be buffing them regularly, because few weapons in this game aren't buffable. Almost everything in this game can be buffed, aside from a couple boss soul weapons, at least as far as I know. So, I guess with that said, like, it's a very, very different world in the Souls game, and you know, weapon durability goes down quicker. You know, so carrying a second weapon is great. I don't feel like it's as cookie cutter in builds as Dark Souls 1 was, where you know, you get your main weapon. Durability didn't mean jack crap, so you just get your katana, fully upgrade your dex katana, and use it all the way through the game. You know, your +5 lightning katana, and you'd be leveling vitality all the way up to 70 or something like that, and gouging everything out. And that was, you know, I'm not saying there's nothing wrong with that, but I'm just saying in this game, like, having a readily accessible bow and things like that makes the game a lot easier, to the point where, you know, it can almost be considered not to. Whereas in Dark Souls 1, you know, having bows and ranged attacks and buffs and stuff, that was always useful and always optimal, but sometimes it was easy enough that there was just no need to take those precautions. Whereas I feel like in Dark Souls 2, the benefit of having those things has reached the point where players should absolutely pursue it. All players should find value in carrying a bow or having a ranged attack, and everyone should go grab a set of binoculars. So
They say
that's my take. That's something new, and you know, some people would even contend that that falls into the, once again, this artificial difficulty thing where, you know, you've just added a bunch of ranged attackers to an environment, thus requiring me to have a bow for many of these enemies. And you know, in no way is that innovative so much as that, quote unquote, just you're just increasing the difficulty to increase the difficulty. And that's where I would say that's definitely off base. I mean, to me, when you're changing fundamental mechanics of areas or zones that in the past, you know, worked in such a way, yeah, that's innovative enough. You know, this whole concept of innovation within video games, it's getting kind of played out for me. Is, you know, what's innovative and what's not. Well, you know, I guess I'm not that picky. I mean, for me, as long as the game isn't just being rehashed over and over, that's enough for me. And I don't feel like this game is a rehash of Dark Souls 1. I don't feel that way. I don't feel like Dark Souls was a rehash of Demon Souls. You know, I feel like all three of these titles will give you a different experience when you boot them up. You know, that's what I'm grateful for. You know, it would be different if I was playing sort of a Madden or Call of Duty, and you know, I've played Call of Duty substantially, and a lot of Call of Duty. I've not played hardly any Madden. I don't follow sports, but yeah, I feel like it's very hard to defend yourself if you play Call of Duty. And basically, I find the only way to be honest with people that talk about, you know, the games that you buy is like, I'm buying the next Call of Duty because the player base will be moving to the next Call of Duty, and I want to do something new. I want to use new guns and stuff like that. You know, there's nothing wrong with decisions like that, but I feel like in these games you are really playing two completely different games. So it has not become for me one of those series that's just rehashing things that already are known to work. And I'm pretty excited about that. I know there was some concerns that, you know, there's a constant give and take in the development cycle of a game like this, particularly when it doesn't appeal to a huge audience. Dark Souls is well received and is popular, but it doesn't have this huge audience where people could, you know, it's small enough that the fan base can get pretty hostile when you start making changes to what they consider to be the fundamental premise and cores of the Souls experience. And some decisions were made that challenged those fundamental cores of Dark Souls as a franchise, and you know, they've admittedly concerned me, but you know, I respect the fact that these games are different games. Like, there are things about this game that agitate me, or that I don't like, that make me want to go back to Dark Souls 1. There are things about this game that make me believe I could never go back to Dark Souls 1, and I think that's how it should be. These games should have identities to them, because, I mean, realistically, I don't think it's possible to make a sequel that's just better in every single way. I don't think it's viable. I think there's too much taste involved, too much personal, you know, personal preference in a lot of what happens, and thus I think that, you know, like I said, I think that these games have to have their own identities, and well, I think the Dark Souls 1 player base is likely going to grow. I think that players are going to become frustrated with some of the PvP decisions that were made in Dark Souls 2, and they're going to go back to Dark Souls 1. And that's a huge topic. The changes that I think to the PvP engine of this game as compared to Dark Souls 1, I think they're so huge and far-reaching that if there's anything bad about this game, the defining quote-unquote bad part about the game, it will be the PvP. I think if anything that defines the negative of Dark Souls 2, it will be what were they thinking when they made some of the PvP choices. But who knows what'll get patched and who won't get patched, and we'll talk about more. I'll cover more of that later, and I don't just mean soul memory. And soul memory is a huge part of what I'm complaining about or at least intend to complain about. But you know, there are other gripes that I think are worth exploring. So kind of reached the end of the commentary here. You know, clocking in an hour and 12 minutes. So I hope you guys have enjoyed. I apologize for some of that sloppy gameplay. It was left in deliberately. Please continue giving me feedback. Let me know what you think of this series. Tell me if you want to see more Dark Souls 2. Like, dislike the videos. I look at this stuff. Like I said, it's a small channel, so your voice is not lost. The voice of one person has a lot of impact on me. Remember, guys, we're not a community of 50,000 viewers here. I mean, if you hit me with a message, I'm going to read it. If you're going to comment on the videos, I'm going to read it. There's a lot of engagement, a lot of impact on these Souls videos, because when you do post-game commentary, you put a lot more energy into your content, I think, than when you do live commentary. Different skill sets, and both have a great place in the world, but I gotta say that I think that I care more about the feedback on my post than my live stuff. So anyway, I'd like to thank everyone for watching, and you'll see me tune up my spells, and that'll pretty much be the end of this video. So thanks for watching, and I will see everyone next time.